Hello, COMS 363 students. I'm going to go through what makes a really good argument. I have the section of the handbook, page 79, showing right now, and that's where the section talks about arguments. And I'm also going to show you some samples of arguments from a student paper, an individual report. What you have here is an overview about why we want deductive arguments in your body of your report. So you also have, sorry, this is my edited version. The handbook, of course, has these edits. But yeah, you have rationale here, and then it goes into what makes a valid claim. So claims are usually topic sentences. Okay, so that means that they're the first sentence introducing the paragraph. And in professional writing, the principle here is that when people are skimming, they're only going to read the first opening to know, oh, does this paragraph contain what I'm looking for? So the beginnings of paragraphs are like primary real estate, and anywhere where you have a heading or a break in a line or an indent catches people's eyes, and they know that they can skim through a report. So this is where your major idea should be, the guts of that paragraph, and the rest of it hangs on it, just like clothing hangs from a hanger. So this is the main idea, the takeaway, and you don't want to delay that until the very end. Sometimes when you're drafting, you will find that you have reversed this and you've put your conclusion at the end of the paragraph, and what you really need to do is think, now I need to restructure this for the reader and take that conclusion out of the end and make it a claim at the beginning. So that happens a lot when people draft, because as you're drafting, you're doing the research process, and you need to then restructure it for a reader who's not doing research with you. So important things about the claim: it should be your own ideas that you arrived at. So it shouldn't be, the claim should not be a secondary source's opinion, and it should not be your research subject's opinion for survey data. So the claim should always be you talking. And then comes data. Data has many different types, and it always depends on the claim. So the nature of the claim will determine the appropriate nature of the data. And so you always need to have some contextualizing information. Data out of context is really difficult to interpret, and it's unfair often to interpret data that's decontextualized. Of course, it should be logically supporting the claim, and it needs to be sufficient in amount, detail, and presentation. So sometimes there's weak data because it's too vague or general. Sometimes the data is not sufficient to prove the claim. There's not enough data, and so you might want to actually narrow your claim. Maybe your claim is too large and would take way too much data to prove it. So you want to make sure that you have a claim that can be proven within that given paragraph. Don't provide too much data. So the problem there is that you end up overwhelming your reader with too many unnecessary details. Maybe you provide an entire list of 5 items when all you need to focus on is 2 items from a source or from a web page. So I talk about different types of data that you can use in website usability report. Most of the time the data will come from the website itself or from participant data, unless you're writing a context section of report A where you're talking about the research you did to find contextual facts about the website you're analyzing. So that becomes your data. So otherwise, normally your primary source is your website and the data from participants. Whenever you talk about style or wording, you have to have quotations. You can't just describe the wording as being succinct or concise without giving an example of what you mean by succinct or concise. So interpretive language is not data, it's just your interpretation, it's your analysis. The data consists of the actual words from the website. Okay, and that's what I explained up there. And now if you're discussing navigation, you might have to give a little narrative. When a reader clicks here or a user clicks here, they get to there, then they get here. You know, you sometimes need a step-by-step process to describe if the data is an actual process. Layout or structure. You sometimes need a visual, maybe a screenshot, or you might need to actually talk about what's above, below, beside, larger than, smaller than, spaced out with sufficient white space. How much is sufficient? Maybe it's 1 inch at 100% zoom. Okay. If you're being careful that you're navigating the site on a desktop, and you're going to have to standardize it by using 100% zoom, and then you can use measures such as approximately inches or centimeters. Otherwise, distances are relative to zoom levels and the size of screen that you're using. So when you have survey data, it's very important to give the survey question number and the wording of the question that could influence its answer. So you give the question number, like question 5, and oftentimes you need to be able to say, well, what was the stem of question 5? What was the response item that you're looking at within question 5? And even if you include it in a figure or a table, it's important to put it in your paragraph so that people don't have to go back and forth with their eyeballs or with their scroll bar. All of the important data should be right there inside of the paragraph, and consider a figure or a table or an appendix to be supplementary. A reader shouldn't feel forced to refer to the website itself or to refer back and forth blinking to the figure. A paragraph should be complete in and of itself, so it needs to actually import detailed data from a figure. Even if it's right next to the paragraph, you actually need to quote words or figures, or words or numbers, or say what's in the upper left column or something like that. You need to import little fragments of data from a figure into a paragraph so that the paragraph can stand on its own. Okay. Using figures and tables, that's important, and not overwhelming. It's the same idea of quoting too much, distracting people. And when you're giving a screenshot, we really don't like to see an entire page unless you're talking about the way the entire page is laid out. And when you screenshot an entire page, you have problems with legibility when you insert it into a document, a Word document, because usually the font size will get very small. So it's very important to consider cropping and annotating so that readers are not overwhelmed by seeing a figure that is too illegible or too complicated. The third step is analysis, and this is where you start to bring in your voice again. And you show how the data that you've provided supports your initial claim. You don't just repeat your initial claim. That would be boring. You need to comment on the data that you've just presented. Oftentimes you need to point out certain features of your data. And this is where your role is like a tour guide. And if you've given a very large quotation, you often need to pull out particular words or phrases from that long quotation and put it into a sentence that shows how you interpret it, how you're making meaning out of that large quotation. Okay. Using a secondary source could be helpful within the analysis phase. This is usually where we find secondary sources, is used in the commentary upon the data that you've provided. So you might quote something and then say what the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says about that feature. And it will help you to analyze it using your words rather than just theirs, because of course they were not analyzing your website. So you need to be able to take their general concepts and show that you can adapt them to the context of the website you're analyzing. And paragraphs should never end with data, never end with a quotation from even secondary data. You always end with your own voice, your own thoughts, your own ideas. And don't leave data unanalyzed at the end of something. Okay? Once you have a complete argument, If you know how to identify claim data analysis, you will know that you'll have a complete argument. Then you can move to the next argument in a new paragraph or a new subsection, and you fulfill the cycle. This is really, really helpful training wheels for your professional argumentation in real life, because if you always get the idea that, okay, after claim, then comes data, then comes analysis, if you get into that habit, you will always have very complete reasoning in your writing. And it's important to be able to justify and inform and persuade people completely in writing, since you're not there to answer their questions. It's just a document and they're reading. So yeah, body paragraphs in the body of a document, meaning like the very detailed analysis sections, that's where we need these types of arguments. Okay. And there might be exceptions where you have a lot of data to present, and if your paragraph goes on more than a page, then you might be in a danger zone of readability. And so there is an exception here that if you really need to break up your paragraphs for readability, then you can actually glue together an argument by using headings, so that several paragraphs go through the claim data analysis process, and that heading unifies them in a 3-paragraph or 2-paragraph section. Okay, that's the instruction, and it's pretty general. So I'm going to go to a sample now. This is going to be from a report from a previous term. I've anonymized it, and it was a fairly good report, but realize that this report I'm giving to show you is a sample that doesn't fit our assignment guidelines. They had to, each student had to do both like a report A and a report B. They had to analyze both the rhetoric and the website in each of those 2 reports. So it's a little different structure, but what you're going to see right now is very similar to the context section of report A. So sorry for the small text size. I think that this video is better viewed in a full screen on a desktop or a laptop. Then you can actually see what's going on here. What I've done is the student hasn't used these colors. I have color coded it so that the claim is in red, data is in green, and the analysis is in blue. And it will help you to see how claim data and analysis fit together. And so that's the claim sentence, is the student's own opinion that this is a challenge facing the website. And they were studying the Trout Unlimited Canada. They introduced the acronym way earlier. And they're making a claim about a particular challenge that they face. Okay. Then they go in to prove it, and they have proven this through finding data from the internet. Okay. So that is going to be Grandy, and a quote from Grandy is the data. Then they go on to analyze that data in the blue section as well, in terms of commenting on why it's important, why it's a challenge, how can it actually influence the decisions that that website makes. Okay. I'm going to show you next, I'm not going to talk about all these comments in the margins, that's for a different video on other things that you can check in your report before submitting it. I'm going to scroll down to a section that is more like a analysis of the content. Okay, so they had a section called Website Usability Analysis, and here they're discussing navigation. Their claim is that the navigational tabs presented on the home page of TOC's website, as well, that should be as well as, at the top of every internal page, there's an error there, do not resemble real-world tabs and can be confusing to web users. So of course that needs explanation about what this person means by real-world tabs. Oftentimes you'll have a claim, you'll have your evaluative statement, okay, a word that says something's positive or something's negative about the website. If you're evaluating the website, you need evaluative language. So this is obviously a negative evaluation, and they're being sensitive about, well, we don't know for sure, but it can and has potential. So when you have something like this, a phrase in there that might need explanation, you can put your citation of the source right away after your claim so that the person isn't left with a question hanging in their mind as they go on. So right away, this quotation, it uses the term real world tabs in it. Okay, so this is another way you can use secondary sources, is to define terms that might be confusing to your reader. They didn't do the greatest job of explaining that concept. The quote doesn't help that much. They need to actually tell the reader what they mean. But anyways, it does have data right here after the quote. The navigational tabs on TU's site, okay, that's a piece of data from the site, are less recognizable than tabs that resemble real-world versions. So that's the only little piece of data, is that little phrase from the until versions. And it is probably insufficient, okay, because it doesn't refer to any particular tabs as examples. It's a generalization that is an interpretation, and it also has less than. And we have no idea of what the two things being compared are. We still haven't got an idea about real-world versions. Do they really mean a file folder, like the traditional type of folders they put in filing cabinets? You know, the little folders that stick up with tabs. Maybe that's what they mean, but this person should explain if that's what the author means. And less recognizable than, we don't know unless you give me example. So this is an example of insufficient data, as well as it's not a comparison that is unclear. But it does go on with and that, and from there we have analysis of the data. That could potentially increase the learning curve of the website to their users, especially people who are not familiar with navigating the web. So there's some grammatical problems there, but the idea is that the writer is going to tell you how it might influence the audience. That's always a valid way to analyze data from a website, is to talk about the impact that a particular piece of data might have on a certain type of user. So they've specified particular users here about how it might influence them and make them confused. It's good to specify particular users when you're talking about user reactions. So here we have a positive evaluation as the next claim, clear and informative. There's your evaluative term. The whole sentence is the idea from the writer of this piece, not from someone else. And so they've done the same sort of strategy of putting a secondary source next to bring in a principle. The danger there is that if you take too long to explain a concept from a secondary source, it delays the data after the claim. So if you do put a secondary source here to explain your claim, try to be as brief as possible so that it doesn't delay the data that is most important to support your claim. Here's the data. By using tab labels that are clear, it can deliver. Okay, well, that's nice and potential, but the claim was about whether it actually, it should be about whether it does. The problem here with this claim is it's being too tentative. You should actually make claims about things that do happen on the website. So, okay, well, here is the R, clear, informative. The problem here is that by using it, it can deliver. Where's their example? Okay, that's the problem, is this should refer to figure 1 if that's where the data is. And if that's a tab label, they should say tab labels such as, quote, our advisors. Then they pull out a piece of data from figure 1 and put it inside the sentence, and that will show what they mean by using tab labels that are clear. Because the word clear is interpretive. You might think something is clear where the next person might not. So you have to give the object that you think is clear and insert that data. Okay. And then you have the next phrase starting with the website can deliver. And I think what they mean is it might have a potential influence on the audience. But I'm getting confused about the cans and the R's here, because the website should be in, yes, what exists on the website, And yes, you can talk hypothetically about the reaction of users. Could would be preferable, okay, when talking in rhetorical analysis, because hypothetical grammar is may, might, could, and try to avoid should unless you're in your recommendations section. You should never really give your own opinion about what should be different on the site or what they should do in the analysis section. You should always wait until you get to your recommendations to talk about your opinions of what should be improved or what could be made better. Okay. So notice this is an argument that praises the website for doing something right. And you can't just give praise without any backing. So it's not like real world where you just say, good job, no support about why you did a good job. Here in the analysis section, if you say something was good, you have to give data and some sort of rational analysis of that data to back up the fact that it's good and make it believable. So that's an overview of what makes the structure of argument from claim to data to analysis. And like I said, I'm not talking about other elements of this sample in this video. So that's all I've been able to cover just for one video. And I'll talk to you later.